Well, welcome to the 2022 Madison Regional Economic Development and Diversity Summit. We have an outstanding day planned for you, so let's get started. I'm Ruben Anthony, the President and CEO of the Urban League of Greater Madison, and I want to thank you all for coming back and joining us. We haven't been in person for a couple of years now, so welcome back to the Economic Development and Diversity Summit. The partnership that we have with MadREP has been 9 years, and our team at MadREP and the Urban League had the foresight several years ago to put this event together. So let's give our team at the Urban League and MadREP a round of applause. You know, today everybody is talking about DEI, but you know, our teams at the Urban League and MadREP had long saw the intersectionality between equity and economic development before it became the thing to do. But it has been rewarding to watch how the country is transforming, and many places are following suit, and diversity and economic development is high on many corporations and businesses' agenda, so we're very thankful for that. But we've been preaching about the value between diversity and economic development for a very long time. So today I stand before you in a very different world than when we last gathered together in this very same room 3 years ago. And during that time, I opened up my remarks by saying that there's change in the air, and a lot has happened since that time. We've experienced a triple pandemic. We had lots of disparities in the justice system in this country, where black and brown people were dying at the hands of police. So there's a pandemic and justice. The economic disparities that we saw across the country continued to be such in housing and lending and other things for brown and black people. So we had this economic disparity. And last but not least, we had a disparity that was brought on by COVID that turned into a healthcare crisis that changed us, I believe, forever. The way we used to work will never be the same. Today, if you didn't know it, it's an employees market, right? We have quite the shortage on employees, and so workers are used to working a different way now. The 40-hour work week in the office is different. People want to work in their pajamas at home and things like that, and it's hard to get them back to work. You know, but we did what we had to do. Workers today want signing bonuses and a lot of perks. Some workers even want to work for two different employers. They're calling it polywork. So if we want to get the most talented workers, we have to ask ourselves the question of whether we're willing to let them work somewhere else too. The bottom line is that we have to look at work organizations in a different way and work towards full employment of all who is ready, willing, and able to work. Through all of this, the MadREP region remains resilient with all our differences and with our many challenges. I am looking forward to our discussion today so that we can continue to talk about how we prepare workers for jobs, how the disadvantaged can build work, and how we can continue to address the disparities in economic security along racial lines and the growing disruptions through supply chains and this new hyper-competitive labor market. Your presence here today is a testament to your commitment to bettering our community. I'm excited to spend the day with you and participate in meaningful discussions to talk about the difficult economic recovery that we are facing, the housing disparities, and what are we doing to make the Madison region the best place for us to live, work, and play. Now, for the first time that we're all back together, I'd like to introduce my new partner in crime, the Madison Economic Development CEO, my good friend, Jason Fields. I was glad when I heard that Jason Fields expressed an interest in leading MadREP, because I know that he has a lot of value to add to that organization, and he is the right person for these times. Very few people have the gift that Jason has in crossing political and social and economic boundaries and pulling people together. And he's a pretty good dresser. Look at that bow tie. Jason has demonstrated this skill over and over as a legislator and as a community leader. Additionally, he is super smart about financial and economic development matters. I have had the privilege of knowing Jason for several decades now, and we couldn't have a more equipped partner for taking on the diversity and economic development opportunities and challenges that we face today. Together, I know we're going to get a whole lot done and continue to make this the fastest and strongest economic region in the state. Now I'd like to introduce you to my good friend and colleague, Jason Fields, the President and CEO of MadREP.
Thank you, Doc. You know, listen, I have to struggle with these glasses because I'm getting old, and so I got to talk to you, look at your face, and then read these notes. But I can't do it at the same time because when I look at all of you, it get blurry, and I don't feel cool when I can't see stuff. So thank you, Doc. You know, there are very few people that you will hear me refer to as the blueprint. And for me, what that means is the blueprint is someone whose spiritual fortitude has gotten to a point where they understand what life is about. Professionally, they've achieved some things that we still talk about to this day. And then someone who's willing to take people on, mentor them, be a big brother. And you all, I'm very personal. I call Dr. Ruben Anthony, I call him Doc, has been that to me. It goes without saying that when I first got this job, I saw his face, I lit up. Because to me, and I told him this, you were the blueprint in how we did things in government, how things were supposed to work. And we still talk about it to this day. In fact, I had Ruben on a radio show in Milwaukee, and after he got off, I got a bunch of phone calls of people saying how much they're doing, because he is the model. And so to you, thank you, man, for just always being there and for being a big brother. And so, Doc, I'm also proud of the partnership between our two organizations, and honestly, I'm proud of all of you. I mean, I'll be remiss. I was a little like, okay, how many people are going to be here? This is my first in-person event, and you guys, you know, the room looks decent, so way to go. I'm proud of all of you and the partnerships we have with our business and civic community that makes this event possible, especially Alliant Energy and UW Health. As you can see from your program, we have a tremendous number of business and community partners, and hundreds of business and community leaders are registered to join us throughout the day. We have an amazing program today with distinguished local and national speakers and compelling topics, including racial disparities in home ownership, inclusive design, the importance of visibility, enlarging our circles, and addressing cultural conflict in the workplace. Again, thank you for gathering with us today. Our teams work hard every year. And let me give another just shout out to our teams. You all, they work nonstop. And Ruben and I wouldn't be in these positions if it weren't for those guys. So to the MadREP team, to the Urban League team, can we give them another applause? Because this stuff is tough. Our teams work hard to bring you dynamic speakers and discussions to further all of our understanding on how diversity, equity, inclusion, and economic development go hand in hand. Now I would like to turn it over to Julie Aulet. In addition to being MadREP board chair, Julie serves as our co-presenting sponsor as UW Health's community relations director. Julie, come up, Watkins. They told me to say some stuff personal about you, and so you all, let me be very clear and honest. Julie is our board chair, and Julie became the board chair when I became the MadREP CEO. And one of the great things about me and Julie and I is Julie is my friend. And so we don't talk about just business. There are days where my father-in-law passed away. And there are days where Julie would say, Jason, I just want to check on you as a person. Y'all, that's important. So thank you.
Oh, Jason. Good morning, everyone. I can throw my notes away now. I knew it would be difficult to follow Dr. Anthony and my friend Jason, and I was right about that. It's very humbling to be in a position of service to MadREP, to our great board, our executive committee, our team, our leader, and to work in partnership with our just esteemed colleagues at the Urban League. I have to say that I've been coming to this event, I think, from the beginning. And it has been a space where I have really grown, learned, and changed as a person and as a leader. I wouldn't be standing here as MadREP board chair if it weren't for that. And I want us to reflect that of the 4 people offering the welcome this morning, 3 are Black men, and I can't help it, I am a white woman, but that's a change. It wasn't this way 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And as much as we have had tumultuous times in our country and our community that continue to challenge us to our very core, we have seen positive change here in Madison, and I'd like to think that some of it has come as a result of what has happened annually at these conferences, which draw leaders. And I mean, I will just say, I was so thrilled to come in this morning and to see from UW Health and Meritor, and I should note that UW Health co-sponsors this with our partners at at Unity Point Health Meritor. So many of our VPs and senior leaders have always come to this, and we bring what we learn back to our businesses. And I know that is true for so many of the other corporate partners here. And that's what makes this event not just a one-day thing, but something that is really the springboard of work that goes on the rest of the year. And that's maybe a point of transition to introduce my UW Health colleague, Rick Ransom, who is today representing the Urban League as its board vice chair. Rick is also the president of Wisconsin Hospitals for UW Health and provides leadership in our partnership with Unity Point Health Meritor. And to me, it's no accident that Rick and I are both here today really representing 2 organizations, but also that we're from UW Health. Because we at UW Health have worked very hard to become and are becoming very long-term and anti-racist organization, working to understand and address acute workforce needs, and continuing in our role as a major employer and economic driver. And I so appreciate the sincerity of our leadership in wanting to come together with all of you to learn and grow and do more to continue to contribute to DEI progress in our region and to economic progress in our region. We are a proud donor to the Black Business Hub, which I can't believe we haven't mentioned yet. A huge shining star coming on the horizon on Park Street, along with so much other incredible work going on there. UW Health has shifted our annual giving to allocate 3/4 of it to organizations led by people of color. And this work is just beginning. And we really cannot succeed in it if we do not fully embrace both progress on DEI and economic development, but also the challenges of addressing centuries of racial and ethnic disparities. That we really have to recognize that always as our starting point. So back to Rick. So Rick has significant responsibilities at UW Health, as you might imagine, being over our hospitals, especially during the pandemic, especially during times of workforce challenge. And he brings that leadership expertise from roles he has had around the country. Rick also brings a background in law, and this is the point where I should make the lawyer joke, but I won't, because I see how Rick brings such thoughtfulness and head and heart to everything he does at UW Health, but I'm so pleased he has been able to make the time and space to also offer leadership in the community in real and meaningful ways. He's a guy who always asks the right questions, and I'm so glad that he's in the role he's in, both at UW Health and the Urban League. So folks, Rick Ransom.
Thank you very much. I'm the son of a physician, and my brother is a physician. And so my dad refers to me as his two-time loser. First, I was a lawyer, and then I became a suit. I became a hospital administrator. So it's always good to be able to be in person these days. I really do want to thank all of the participants. I moved to Madison in 2018, just in time for my first ever polar vortex. And as Julie was mentioning, a lot of my day job responsibilities the last couple of years has been working with our healthcare system leadership throughout the community. So that includes Meriter, that includes the folks at St. Mary's, to try to deal with COVID first as a pandemic and more recently as an endemic. Right, so my day job hat that I wear has been focused a lot on the treatment of disease in the community. On behalf of the over 20,000 team members at Unity Point Health Meriter, Quartz, and UW Health, greetings and thank you for coming this morning. I also am here able to be the fourth person to make some welcome remarks. And as I was looking at the agenda and realized that there were going to be 4 people and I would be the last of them to make some opening remarks, the words of a very wise college professor. He told me that the mind can absorb only what the rear end can tolerate. And so with that in mind, I'm going to try to keep it brief. But I am here as vice chair of the Urban League of Greater Madison Board. There are 12 of us. We are referred to as the Dynamic Dozen. Okay, we're not referred to as the Dynamic Dozen. I was hoping to make that a thing if I spoke it into reality. Our chair, Beth Curley-Prestine, was not able to be here. She sends her regrets. I am very lucky and fortunate to serve with folks like Chief Noble Ray, Dr. Gloria Ladson-Billings, Dr. Frank Byrne, LaDonna Reed, and others. And on behalf of the board, I want to thank you for being here this morning and participating. From my perspective, this event, this discussion could not be more timely. Going really to the core mission of the Urban League, which is the promotion of social justice, and the combating of inequality by focusing on economic development. At this moment in time, this discussion couldn't be more valuable. Whether it is changes in gas prices, looking at year-over-year inflation, we are on the cusp of really important legislation that's been passed to try to address some of the economic challenges that we have. And we're also really close to some important elections. So this moment in time is very significant for us as community leaders, as people of the people that are part of the economic engine in Madison, to be engaged in this type of discussion. So with that in mind, I want to give one more last thank you for your participation in the discussion today. I expect that as the other 9 have been, that this will be a productive and useful part of driving towards economic development in the Madison region and making sure that economic development here is inclusive as can possibly be. So thank you all.
Well, thank you, Rick and Julie. You know, Julie mentioned the Black Business Hub. You know, for us to do a project like the Black Business Hub, it takes a lot of support. And one of our first supporters for our Black Business Hub, which is a $25.5 million place for Black businesses, small businesses, women-owned businesses to come grow their businesses, have the resources there to support them. But one of the first agencies that raised their hand and said, we want to help you with this, was the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. So today, I'm pleased to introduce Missy Hughes, who is the Secretary of WEDC. Before joining WEDC in October of 2019, she was the General Counsel and Chief Mission Officer at Organic Valley. Her previous position included being the Associate Attorney at the firm of Holland and Hart, where she practiced in the area of natural resources, construction litigation, and corporate business transactions. Secretary Hughes is shown to be a strong supporter of the Urban League of Greater Madison. To support our efforts to build this Black Business Hub for brown, Black people in South Madison, initially they gave us a grant for $400,000, and with this grant, we're able to provide access to capital, grants and loans to businesses that don't typically have access to capital. During the height of COVID, Black businesses were applying and trying to save themselves and get loans, and only 5% of those businesses were able to get loans in that first rendition or issuance of loans. But WEDC, came to the rescue for us and gave us grants that we can start giving out right away. In addition, WEDC went even further. They are actually moving into the Black Business Hub. And, to support the Urban League, minority business enterprises, and to attract and support businesses throughout Wisconsin. So I'd like you to please give Secretary Hughes a large round of applause, because they're not only talking about stuff, they're actually getting it done. And so I want to thank you for all your support, Secretary Hughes. Let's give her a round of applause.
Thank you, Dr. Anthony. Good morning, everyone. Dr. Anthony stole some of my thunder over being a tenant in the hub. When we heard that the hub was being built, it was immediately an opportunity for WEDC to go from where we currently are in the Tommy Thompson building, just one block off the square, where economic development does not happen, to a place where we knew economic development would be a central focus. And so we're so excited to be moving down to Park Street and Hughes Place no relation, as we like to say, but it will be just such an opportunity for our organization to be centered right where Black businesses are being birthed and are growing, and we can learn and understand what we can do to support those businesses and how we can help make them even more successful. So I just quickly wanted to reflect a little bit on the theme of today's conference about diversity in the workplace and making sure that we have the workforce that we need here in Madison and Wisconsin for Wisconsin to continue to compete on the global and in the global marketplace. Dr. Anthony mentioned that 3 years ago we were in a very, very different place. And in fact, 3 years ago, just about now is when I started in this role, a few months before the pandemic hit. And when I started, the conversation at my level was really about the supporting businesses and the workforce of tomorrow, this 500,000 foot level conversation that, if you think about it, is really the antithesis of diversity. If we can treat the workforce as this giant block of humans that we don't have to think about their individual needs or their opportunity to prosper, we can really ignore a lot of the challenges that we face as a state and as a nation. When the pandemic hit, all of that really changed, because although we were faced with this global situation, this global pandemic where everybody was talking about how it was affecting China and coming across through Europe and Italy and France, remember all of that, it was an incredibly personal time. Not only were our health and our safety at issue, we were talking about isolating and masks versus not masks, and could you have more than 10 people in a room, but we also saw that if you didn't have childcare, if you didn't have transportation, if you didn't have safe transportation, if you were subject to public transportation, if you didn't have stable housing or food security, this really impacted your ability to prosper, your ability to participate even in the economy. And so as we worked our way through that, as we had the CARES Act funding and the American Rescue Plan Act funding come through, WEDC had the opportunity to help the governor in deployment of those dollars to businesses. We helped with over $600 million worth of deployment of funds to business, which for Wisconsin is incredible, and in fact puts Wisconsin #1 in the country on a per capita basis for deployment of funds to businesses. So we had that opportunity, and as Dr. Anthony mentioned, at WEDC, we really tried to focus on businesses that were falling through the gaps, businesses that didn't have citizenship, which was something you needed to get the Paycheck Protection Act. Businesses that didn't have employees. Many, many diverse-owned businesses have no employees and therefore weren't eligible for many of the programs that were coming through. Some of those businesses were underbanked and unbanked, and we had to learn at WEDC, we didn't really know how to engage with those businesses, and we needed partners like MadREP or the Urban League or the African American Chamber of Commerce or the Hmong Chamber of Commerce to help us access those businesses and get the assistance to them that we could during that time. But as we came through the pandemic, we continued to think about this idea that the personal challenges of Wisconsinites in engaging in the economy fully were something that still needed to be addressed. And we worked with the governor's office to develop what we call the Workforce Innovation Grants. This is $138 million that the governor has dedicated to removing obstacles that Wisconsinites see when they try to enter into the workforce, whether it's obtaining the proper skills, whether it is having childcare, whether it's having transportation to get to work. These are the things that are keeping Wisconsinites out of the workforce. And when that happens, you have often marginalized folks sitting on the sidelines. You have people who aren't able to fully have a job that's consistent, to show up for shift after shift at manufacturers. Because once they have their childcare fall apart 3 days into their training, they can't go to work, and it all falls apart. And so what we've done with the Workforce Innovation Grants is really focus on different regions all around the state. We said to those regions, please come to us with what your priorities are and how we can help you with getting those folks into the workforce. Here in Madison, we've supported Operation Fresh Start, which is an incredible organization that helps young people enter into either the construction trade or the conservation trade. If the classroom isn't working for them, they're able to get into the workforce, they're able to get paid while they're doing their training, and construction companies are right there to bring those folks onto the sites, bring those kids onto the sites and give them the opportunity to really get working and really gain skills. We've worked with the Boys and Girls Club of Madison. We've worked with the Madison College to enable training of childcare workers and the potential to own a childcare business and learning what that takes. So what we've really done is try to focus as much as we can strategically on where we can increase participation in the workforce and doing it on a really, really personal level, because that personal level then increases our diversity. I'll give you one more example, which is a recent grant we made to the Down Syndrome Association of Wisconsin. It's an $8 million grant to help disabled individuals enter into the workforce. And I know Dr. Anthony mentioned, as general counsel of a company, it is incredibly difficult to think about accommodating and making sure that you're doing everything you can. But what a gift to be able to bring someone into the workforce and have everyone else experience working with that person. And that's the value of diversity, is not just for the diverse individual, but it's also for everyone else to be able to learn different perspectives. And if we want Wisconsin to be competitive, which of course we do, if we want Wisconsin to continue to thrive, and if we want Wisconsin to be a place where people will stay and live and raise their families and move here, we have to think about all of these foundational pieces. And with Governor Evers' help, we've been able to really strategically invest these dollars in order to create a foundation of diversity and strength that we need here in Wisconsin. We have a long, long way to go, but we will continue doing this work, and at WEDC, it's incredibly important to us, and we will continue to focus on it into the future. Thank you so much for having me here today, and I really look forward to the rest of the program.
Thank you, Secretary Hughes. It is my honor and pleasure to introduce you to our next speaker, Matt Curis, a distinguished community development specialist with the University of Wisconsin's Madison's Division of Extension. Before I joined the organization, MadREP and Matt worked together for several years researching and writing exhaustive reports on the Madison region's 5 key industry sectors. Matt works in partnership with Extension's statewide network of resources to assist communities and organizations in the areas of regional economic analysis, labor force research, socioeconomic impact analysis, and industry sector competitiveness. Today, he'll deliver the summit's annual economy overview session, and his presentation will focus on entrepreneurs of color in Wisconsin and the Madison region. Ladies and gentlemen, a person I can listen to all day. Matt, come on up here, brother.
Good to see you. Thanks so much. Am I on? Good? All right. Good morning, everyone, and thank you to the Urban League and thank you to MadREP for the opportunity to be with you this morning. It's a pleasure to be here. It's great to see you all in person, and thank you so much for coming. And as he just said, I am going to spend about 20 minutes with you talking about entrepreneurs of color. And okay, we have our slides up. Great. And this is a topic that I think is really important based on all the things we've already heard this morning. And I'm going to throw a lot of information at you in the next 20 minutes or so, but there's a lot more out there as well. So don't feel like you have to sit and scribble this all down. If there's something that's important to you, I will make sure you get the data that you need, and I can share more data as well. So let's think about entrepreneurship in general and why it's important. And we could spend a lot of time speaking about why entrepreneurship is important to productivity, to economic growth. But today I just want to focus on why it's important to jobs. And for better or for worse, a lot of times when we talk about economic development, it comes down to how many jobs do we maintain or how many jobs do we create. And traditionally, over time, as we've grown the economic development profession, we really based our work on industrial recruitment. So how do we attract more companies to our region, to our state, to wherever we're working? How do we expand existing companies? And then at the tip of the triangle, we devote some time to small business support. Over time, though, we've learned that most jobs on a net basis don't necessarily come from small businesses or from existing companies. They come from new businesses. They come from startups. So when we think about the contemporary model of economic development, we think about entrepreneurship as a foundation for economic growth. We also continue to work on things like retention and expansion, and attraction remains as well, but now it's at the top of the triangle instead of the base of the triangle. So today when we talk about entrepreneurs of color, let's just think about our baseline, what we look like in terms of our diversity in the Madison region compared to the state of Wisconsin and compared to the United States. The bars you see there on the left side of the graph are individuals that identify as white alone. And then we also have a share of individuals that identify as Hispanic or Latino, Black or African American, population of 2 or more races, Asian alone, and American Indian and Alaska Native. And these are categories used by the Census Bureau and by other researchers, so these are the ones I will use throughout this presentation. Now we see in the Madison region and the state of Wisconsin, we are slightly less diverse in terms of most of these categories. The one exception being American Indian in the state of Wisconsin, but for the most part, we do have a smaller share of individuals identifying other than white alone. Now that said, we are very diverse in terms of where individuals live across the state of Wisconsin and across the Madison region. I think oftentimes when you talk about diversity in the state of Wisconsin, we focus on places like Madison, Milwaukee, Green Bay, and certainly those are some of the most diverse places in the state. However, we are very diverse across the rural-urban continuum. So this is a share of African American population by census tract back to the 2020 census, and you can see that across the Madison region, across the state of Wisconsin, there are places that are quite diverse. This is the Asian population. Again, not just in Madison, Milwaukee, and Green Bay, but certainly across all of Dane County, across other places throughout southern Wisconsin, and across western and central Wisconsin. American Indian and Alaska Native population, obviously a high concentration associated with many tribal areas, but again, throughout the entire state. There we go. And finally, Hispanic or Latino population, 2,000. And again, if we look throughout the Madison region, very diverse in many areas. So what this means when we think about entrepreneurs of color is that when we're trying to help these individuals grow their business, it's not just about one place, it's about how do we reach across a large geographic region. And with the way the Census Bureau has changed how they conduct the bicentennial census, the way that they've classified race and ethnicity has changed a little bit, so it's kind of hard to make comparisons of how the population has changed over time. That said, we can look at a different data set and say how the region has changed in terms of employees of color from 1990 up to 2021. This is by quarter, and we can see that the Madison region went from 4.4% of the labor force in 1990, up to over 15% in the year 2021. So very, very large growth in the Madison region. So think about that 15.6% as a benchmark as we go through some of this data related to entrepreneurs of color. So this is just for documentation purposes. The data set that we use to look at many characteristics of entrepreneurs of color is the US Census Bureau's annual business survey. I won't go into the details in terms of the pros and cons of using this data set, but it is one that we rely on quite a bit. So let's first think about how the state of Wisconsin looks compared to the rest of the United States in terms of the number of minority-owned employer businesses. So employer businesses obviously are firms that have some sort of employment in them. They're not sole proprietors. They're not non-employers. And what we've done here is look at it on a per capita basis, essentially, across the entire United States. And one of the things you'll notice is that the state of Wisconsin is in the lowest quintile for per capita ownership for minority employer businesses. These are minority-owned non-employer businesses, so sole proprietors, a one-person mom or pop shop. You'll also see that the state of Wisconsin is in the lowest quintile in the entire United States. Now that said, if we look at, I got a little ahead of myself. If we look at the correlation between ownership for employer businesses and non-employer businesses, for business owners of color versus business owners of any type, we see that there's a very strong correlation in terms of ownership rates. So the orange dot you see there is the state of Wisconsin, one chart being employer businesses, the other being non-employer businesses. And that there's a very strong correlation that if you have a high ownership rate across all business categories, you will have a high ownership rate for business owners of color. So what that says is that when we think about how to address opportunities for business owners of color and all business owners, we have to think about our overall entrepreneurial ecosystem. We also have to think about cultural, historical, and structural factors that go into why we are the way we are right now in terms of ownership rates.
Working to understand and address acute workforce needs and continuing in our role as a major employer and economic driver. And I so appreciate the sincerity of our leadership in wanting to come together with all of you to learn and grow and do more to continue to contribute to DEI progress in our region and to economic progress in our region. We are a proud donor to the Black Business Hub, which I can't believe we haven't mentioned yet. A huge shining star coming on the horizon on Park Street, along with so much other incredible work going on there. UW Health has shifted our annual giving to allocate 3/4 of it to organizations led by people of color. And this work is just beginning. And we really cannot succeed in it if we do not fully embrace both progress on DEI and economic development, but also the challenges of addressing centuries of racial and ethnic disparities.
We can also look at characteristics in terms of the number of employees per firm by different industry sector for business owners of color compared to white non-Hispanic business owners. And what you see here, with just one exception being healthcare and social assistance, business owners of color tend to employ fewer employees on average than white non-Hispanic business owners. So how do we find opportunities to increase employment within these firms? We can also look at average payroll. So this is the average earnings per employee by different industry sector for business owners of color compared to white non-Hispanic business owners. And again, here, with the one exception of professional, scientific, and technical services, average payroll on average per employee tends to be lower as well across all categories of ownership. So while we don't have good data for the Madison region, we do have some broad statistics for the metropolitan statistical area, the 4-county area that makes up the Madison MSA. And if any of you saw Dr. Perry present last year, he talked about parity. So how do we help business owners of color at least reach the same levels of ownership rates, of payroll, and of employment as white non-Hispanic business owners? So let's think about how we compare right now in the Madison metro area to the United States and the state of Wisconsin for the number of employer firms per 1,000 residents. This is in 2019, so prior to the pandemic. We can see that for business owners of color, the United States had 8.2 firms per 1,000 residents, state of Wisconsin was 5.1, and the Madison metro area was 5.4. Compared to white non-Hispanic business owners in the Madison metro area, it was 21.6. So very large disparity there. Average employees per firm. This is where Madison metro area stacks up a little bit better compared to some of the comparisons we see for the United States and the state of Wisconsin, as well as white non-Hispanic business owners. 11.5 employees per firm compared to 12.0 in the Madison metro area. Average payroll per worker in employer firms. And here we again see lower levels for the United States, for Wisconsin, and the Madison metro area, compared to white non-Hispanic business owners, and a fairly large disparity in the Madison metro area. So what if we could reach parity? What would it look like in terms of the impact on our economy? So if we reach parity on average employees per firm, the Madison metro area would add 360 employees, and Wisconsin would add over 22,000. Now, 360 doesn't seem like a big number, but that's just kind of the tip of the iceberg. And we did see before that the number of employees per firm was pretty similar in the Madison metro area to white non-Hispanic business owners. What if we reach parity on average payroll per employee? Well, the Madison metro area would add $188 million in payroll. The state of Wisconsin would add $750 million. What if we reach parity on business ownership per 1,000 residents? The Madison metro area would add almost 2,000 firms, 2,000 employer firms. And think about if those employer firms then grew the number of jobs per firm to the same rate as white non-Hispanic business owners. Tremendous potential economic impact. One other thing we have to realize is that non-employer firms make up the biggest share of firms. So most firms that are out there do not have employees. So if we think about non-employer firms as a share of all firms, we can see that for business owners of color in the Madison metro area, it's 86.5% of all firms. So the question is, how do we find those individuals? Because a lot of them, operations are very small. And also, how do we help them perhaps grow into an employer firm if they want to do that? Not everyone certainly wants to become an employer firm, but how do we help them make that transition and grow if they would like to make that step? So the other question, I think, when we think about non-employer firms, we saw this giant resignation, the great resignation during the pandemic. So we look at the number of quits in the state of Wisconsin. Starting in July 2020, we saw the number of people quitting their jobs voluntarily went up dramatically. We also see at that same time the number of applications to start businesses spiked dramatically and has remained high since that time. So we have a lot of anecdotes about this. We don't have direct evidence, but there's a pretty good sense out there that a lot of folks that were quitting their jobs were also going out and starting businesses. So again, how do we find these individuals and help them grow their firms if that's something they would like to do? Because there's a lot of them out there. So obviously, capital and access to capital is a big barrier for many individuals, especially business owners of color. This is data from the Federal Reserve Bank collected in 2020. The data you see here is certainly a snapshot, but these trends have existed for a very long time. So don't let the single year kind of bias your viewpoint on this. This looks at total financing received by firms of different ownership, so white, Asian, Hispanic, and black, for individuals that are considered to be a low credit risk, so have good credit, or individuals that are medium or high credit risk. What we see across the board is that regardless of credit risk, white firms were more likely to get all or some of the financing they asked for when they applied, and much lower rates for Asian, Hispanic, and black business owners. We can also think about home ownership. So home ownership is a source of equity for so many entrepreneurs that want to get loans and tap equity in their homes. And I know you're going to talk about home ownership later in the summit. So this looks at home ownership rates by different race and ethnicity groups in the Madison region compared to Wisconsin and the United States. In the Madison region, the black home ownership rate is 19%. The Hispanic or Latino ownership rate is 41%. And you also see it's below state and national averages in almost every instance. So how do we think about opportunities for more equitable outcomes? How do we support business owners of color? So I think the very first thing we can do is think about to reach parity, to address some of these disparities in ownership rates, is just to encourage more startups. We can't get to where we want to be unless we have more people starting businesses. And we see that for firms less than 2 years old, Wisconsin business owners of color own 1.48 firms, per 1,000 residents compared to 1.9 nationally. So how do we get more startups into the pipeline? I think this is an important one too. Build awareness of and celebrate entrepreneurs of all types. I think so many times when we think of entrepreneurship, we like to think of the gazelles, we like to think of the unicorns, and those are really important sources of economic growth and important to the region. But I'd also like to see it's to build attention of entrepreneurship as a means of bringing personal and community wealth as well. So supporting entrepreneurs of all types, regardless of the industry or their background. Obviously financing, I won't go into all that, but certainly, as you all know, that is an important consideration. Growing procurement and supplier diversity, and there's a lot of good initiatives out there already that are going on to help entrepreneurs of color get access to additional contracts at both public and private institutions. And enhancing anchor institution leadership. How do we get some of our big employers, some of our key industry drivers, some of our financial firms, foundations, and so on and so forth, to help buy into supporting entrepreneurs of color? And you've already heard some good examples of how that's going on in the Madison region and the state of Wisconsin. Wraparound services, things like what the hub will offer, networks, things like mentoring, technical assistance, and skill development. And improving broadband access and digital equity. This is some research from one of my colleagues, Tessa Conroy, and she has found that where you have access to reliable broadband at a decent price, it helps improve startup rates and helps improve businesses' growth rates. So access to broadband is not just important for many of the other aspects that we use it for, but also for entrepreneurship. So I know it's a lot of information to throw at you this morning. That's my contact information. If anyone would like a copy of this slide deck, I'm more than happy to make it available. And with that, thank you again for being here this morning.
Told you all I could listen to Matt all day. So our next speaker is a dear friend of mine, or not speaker, but she's introducing our next dynamic speaker, Griselda Aldrete. I believe I pronounced that right, Griselda. Griselda was one of the first people I called when I got here, and it was to work on broadband. And we know each other from Milwaukee, and so when I saw, I said, "What do you want me to say about you?" She said, "Jason, tell them that I'm the business." So Griselda, Miss the Business, please welcome to the microphone.
Good morning. I didn't think he was actually going to say that, so thanks, Jason, for embarrassing me. Good morning. Buenos dias. My name is Griselda Aldrete. I'm the Director of Stakeholder Engagement at Alliant Energy, and I'm here honored to represent our company and our president of the Wisconsin Power and Light Company, Mr. David De Leon. Our company is proud to have a member of our team on the board of directors for MadREP, and that is David De Leon. We truly hope that you are inspired by the fantastic speakers that you're here today and the breakout sessions available today. While Alliant Energy is traditionally known for providing energy products and services like natural gas and electricity at homes and businesses, we also work with the community to partner in Wisconsin and Iowa to advance economic development opportunities, including in the 8 counties that MadREP represents in Wisconsin. Success in economic development is often reliant on a strong workforce. Diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts are a big part of our ability to retain and recruit talent here in our state. Therefore, Alliant Energy is once again proud to be a presenting sponsor of this Diversity Summit. The opportunity for growth, education, and motivation that comes from this event aligns well with our company values and goals to serve customers and build stronger communities. We appreciate our strong relationship with the Madison Region Economic Partnership and with the Urban League of Greater Madison. I look forward to our continued collaborations to advance traditional economic development opportunities like new business recruitment and business retention and expansion. This morning, I have been given the honor of introducing our first keynote speaker, Dr. Javier Avila. Now, to prep for this, I watched his videos that were assigned to me, right? And as a Latina, I thought, oh my God, am I even gonna get it right? Because it was like this pronunciation, and I think I did. We met backstage, and we actually, I think, connected maybe virtually in 2017, and I was honored to be able to reconnect with him back there and watch your journey soar. And so I think this morning we're in for a treat, but I'll stick to the script now. Dr. Avila is a man of many talents, all of which are on display in his one-man show, The Trouble with My Name, where he skillfully combines poetry and comedy to shed light on the American Latino experience. Dr. Avila's message has been a success with over 150 shows throughout the country. He has also experienced success in other avenues, most notably in academia, where he was the first Latino to be named Professor of the Year for the state of Pennsylvania. Dr. Avila is also an award-winning novelist, having won the ICP Book of the Year Award and the Pen Club Book of the Year for his novels El Papel del Difunto y La Simetría del Tiempo, respectively. This will be Dr. Avila's first performance in Wisconsin. So let's give him a round of applause, but also learn a little bit more about him through a video that we'll watch together this morning.
This is a public service announcement brought to you by The Trouble with My Name.
We're going to help you have no trouble saying my name.
Sure, I've been saying the name Javier Avila for nearly 20 years. So here's a little tip to help you say it correctly too.
The first syllable of Avila is stressed, like it's suffering from stress. Vila.
Javier Avila.
Yes, and if that doesn't work, try a different approach.
The more you hear it, easier it is to say. Javier Avila. Avila, like the A in Avenue. Avila Avenue. When you think of Avila, think of Avenue.
Avila.
Perfect. Just like that. Avila.
Okay, let's practice. I'll go first. Javier Avila.
Javier Avila.
Javier Avila.
Javier Avila.
Javier Avila.
If you can't roll the R, no problem. You can use the good old English R.
Javier. Javier.
Javier.
Now add the last name. Avila.
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 Avila. Say it proudly.
Javier Avila.
Javier Avila. Javier Avila.
Javier Avila.
Whether you speak Spanish or not, you can say it.
Javier Avila.
Javier Avila.
Javier Avila.
Javier Avila. Javier Avila.
Javier Avila.
Javier Avila.
Javier Avila.
Javier Avila.
Javier Avila.
No matter how old you are, it's fun to say it.
Javier Avila.
Go ahead. Give it a try.
Javier Avila. It's easy to say someone's name correctly, and it matters.
A little secret, you're not going to be able to eat lunch unless each of you can go and pronounce it before you get your lunch. Just kidding. Thank you so much, Dr. Avila, for taking the time to be with us today. I will now turn it over to you, but Jason and Dr. Anthony, congratulations on what I know is going to be another great event today. Thank you.
I am mic'd perfectly by this young man. Thank you so much for being here. It is an honor, a pleasure to be in Madison. After I am done speaking, which will last about 46 minutes and 3 seconds, I will give 3 autographed books containing some of the poems that I will read here today to the first 3 people who ask questions. I'll leave them here. So, by the way, that was my boy, who is here somewhere, probably getting coffee first, but he'll be here. So, I am Javier Avila, and I was born and raised in Puerto Rico. Any Puerto Ricans here today? Espérate, yo pensaba que había una o dos. All right, for the 3 of you. Woo! Yes! So, the 3 of you will understand this, the rest of you, just trust me. All my life in Puerto Rico, I was white. I was born. My aunts and cousins looked at me and said, pero mira qué lindo, qué blanquito ese bebé. And I grew up blanquito. I saw the movie Ghost with Patrick Swayze, and I thought I was Patrick Swayze. A friend of mine from Pennsylvania said, dude, you are not Patrick Swayze. You're the Puerto Rican guy who killed Patrick Swayze. You're Willie Lopez. And I thought the only dark-skinned person in my family was my dad. Why? Because my mom would call him negro, which means literally black man. It is a term of endearment. In Puerto Rico, it means honey or sweetheart. But I thought when I was little, bueno, papi es negro, pero yo no. I wrote my dad a Christmas card when I was 6 years old, and it read, papi, tú eres chocolate, pero como quiera te quiero. Translation, Daddy, you are chocolate, but I love you anyway. So as you could see, at that young age, I was indeed a little racist. But life has a way of presenting irony to all of us. And 30 years after I wrote that card to my dad, I became the dark one in my family. And there is a formula for that. Here's what you do. You marry a white woman, and then you go ahead and have a whitino child. And yes, and that makes you understand the fallacy of race, the construct. Otherwise, how would it be possible for me to be white one day, brown the next day, and be exactly the same person with the same values and the same value? So that was a bubble that needed to burst in my life, the bubble of race. Another bubble, my concept of parental sleeping arrangements. You see, my parents slept in separate beds. My mom in a big bed in the middle of the room, my dad in a tiny twin bed in the corner of the room, and he had the sheets wrapped around him tightly like a burrito. And to me, that was normal. It was normal. Whatever happens to you when you're little, you think is normal. I went to a friend's house for my first sleepover, and my friend's giving me a tour of his parents' house. And come on up, it's okay, come on up. And, but by the way, my best side is my left. So I'll go like that, all right. And I see all the rooms, and then I get to my friend's parents' bedroom, and I see just one bed. So I asked my friend, Ruben, where does your dad sleep? And of course, that's when he informed me, after knowing my situation with my parents, that my parents were not normal, and that the Flintstones arrangement that they had was weird. I asked my mom, that night I called her and I said, Mami, ¿por qué tú y papi, why do you and dad sleep in separate beds? And she said, oh, mijo, your dad is a violent sleeper. And the first night that we spent in the same bed together, in his sleep, he punched and kicked me out of bed. And I said, negro, no. Tú tienes que tener tu camita, you gotta get your own bed. This cannot be. But I didn't know why until later in life, when I realized that my dad, when he was 19 years old, back in 1951, he, as a member of the U.S. Army, went to fight for our country in the Korean War as a member of the 65th Infantry, La 65 de Infantería de Borinqueniers. This was a segregated military unit because at the time, Puerto Rican soldiers were not allowed to fight alongside white soldiers. They desegregated the Army in my dad's time, so he was able to be integrated. But what he experienced was so traumatic that he had nightmares every night about it, including his best friend dying in his arms. So that's why he couldn't have a good night's sleep. So you see, when people exhibit weird behavior, there's a reason behind it usually, and we have to practice a little bit of empathy. But talking about other bubbles, the third bubble that needed to burst in my life, the bubble of language. I grew up in Puerto Rico where everybody's first language is Español, and Spanish is my first language. But I went to a school where everything was in English. All instruction was in English. It was a private Catholic military academy. I have suffered. So I had a different childhood than most Puerto Rican children. I spoke English at school, Spanish at home, and Spanglish everywhere else. And again, I thought that was normal. And then I went to the University of Puerto Rico, La UPI, yes, and I start speaking my Spanglish in front of my classmates, and they make fun of me. They thought I was uppity. They think, pero mira este tipo, se cree que gringo. Look at this guy, he thinks he's an American, speaking English like that. And that offended me. And I thought to myself, you know what? If people here in Puerto Rico don't appreciate me speaking another language in public, surely in Pennsylvania they will. Well, something could happen every now and then if you're caught speaking Spanish while brown. Hopefully nothing, and hopefully it doesn't happen to any of you, but every now and then it happens, and it happened to me and a good friend of mine many years ago when we went to a restaurant in Hazleton, Pennsylvania, both college professors, me and my friend, speaking Spanish to each other, and the waitress said something that I couldn't understand. Just like I can't understand when someone says, "This is America, speak English," because apparently they don't know that English is not the official language of the U.S., even though we can speak it, but you can also speak Italian, Spanish, and German, and a bunch of other languages. Whenever someone holds up a sign that says, "This is our country," and they misspell the word "our," rejoice in the fact that a good racist can hate much better than he can spell. But it may happen. So what I'm going to do is by the way, I don't know if you knew that you were going to be read poetry today, so some poems today. So the first poem is about that incident and about my beloved dad. And I would like to dedicate it to anyone who has served in the military in this great nation. This is Denied Service. Upon being heard speaking Spanish at the entrance of a restaurant in Hazleton, PA, should I have told the waitress that my father never had a good night's sleep, that he was haunted by recurrent nightmares after that day when he, a young man with stripes on his shoulders, led Private Diaz and Private Gonzalez to the safety of the trenches, and rescued Corporal Murphy, Private Williams, and Private First Class De Leon from the hovering claws of tanks and gunfire before he tried and failed to save Private Rivera. 20-year-old Carlos Rivera, Carlitos, beloved father of newborn Maria Rivera, to whom he promised to return safely from Korea. My father, deafened by the shots, the shrieks of torture, the agony of oscillating bullets, dragged Carlitos' body through smoke and ashes. Saw the blood run in rivulets over the mud. The tourniquet was not enough to stop the flow. And as Carlitos bled to death, my father said, "Hold on, my friend. Aguanta, que pronto salimos de esto." But they would not get out in time for life. And for Carlitos, who whispered "Mi Maria" as his last breath, that would be it. This cross my father carried with him every day. Should I have told the waitress that my uncle lost both legs in Vietnam, and that the phantom pain no morphine could erase, the throbbing of the stumps, the constant pounding, sharp like a tornado, relentless like the memory of war, would follow him throughout the bitter journey from opium to Prozac? And a decade after his return to the island, he still assured my mother that the American Military Academy was the best choice for me to learn the discipline of service. Should I have told the waitress that both my father and my uncle, who worked for the federal government, died in the same veterans hospital in Guaynabo the same year my cousin enlisted in the U.S. Marine Corps? Should I have told the waitress that after years with a junior ROTC insignia on my sleeve and a bilingual education on the island that Spain forgot, I now teach English to native English speakers in North America, the English that I learned in the Caribbean, specifically the U.S. Commonwealth? Yes, a Commonwealth like the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Puerto Rico, where I was born and raised. Should I have told the waitress that having this skin that white people pay good money for at the tanning salon is not a crime? That saying salud instead of bless you when someone sneezes is not a crime? That greeting friends with a kiss instead of a handshake is not a crime? That teaching Spanish to my son, who calls the mainland home, is not a crime? That I could not remove the plátano stain on his back, nor would I want to, because he is the grandson of Sergeant Avila, who sacrificed his health for us, who didn't let Carlitos die in vain, who taught me well the value of silence and of words, who knew since he was the same age as this woman, who has already judged me, that there are things in this world that cannot be denied. Soy ciudadano de los Estados Unidos y soy puertorriqueño. Should I have told the waitress anything when she called me a foreigner? Thank you. Gracias. Thank you for that. So, growing up in Puerto Rico, I was in the majority. I didn't know what it was like to be a minority until I moved to Pennsylvania. And it is a shock to experience that in your 20s and 30s because it's different. It's one thing to have those messages and to internalize it as a child. But as an adult, you realize immediately, man, one of the burdens of being in the minority is that you constantly have to prove to the majority that you are not the stereotype that they have of you. And that can be exhausting. Sometimes you just want to take off the mask and be invisible in a positive way, but you can't. You cannot. And there are always signs that give it away that you are in fact Latino or Latina or Latin. And I joke about that because, people who speak Spanish don't really understand the X. But anyway, going back to this. The first sign, because there are many, but the first sign is your name. Your name. If you are a married woman from Puerto Rico and you move from the island to the mainland, the trouble with your name begins. Because in Puerto Rico, women don't take their husbands' last names because they don't love them. I'm kidding, of course, it's culture and that's the way it is. Over there, if you and your husband have the same last name, you may have married a blood relative. So you see, it's all about context. My wife and I don't have the same last name. Everyone who knows us knows that. Yet, we received an invitation to a fancy dinner after I won that big award, one of the big awards that I've won, thank God. And they wanted to show me off. So they invite me to Philadelphia, fancy event in front of a lot of VIP. And the invitation reads on the envelope, to Dr. and Mrs. Javier Avila. And we all know that that means they invited me and my wife. But to a Puerto Rican, that could mean at least three things. Number one, that I am both Dr. and Mrs. But that is not the case. Number two, that I got so lucky in my life that I met and married a woman with exactly my first and last name. Mira mi esposa Javier Avila, mírala aquí, mira que linda. And the third, the common assumption that upon marriage, a woman's last name, gone, until the divorce, and, wow, I thought that would be funnier, but anyway. And why not just not even say her first name and just encapsulate everything in my name? Well, my wife said, you know what, honey, I'm not going. Like, honey, are you sure? There's going to be very, very, very important people there. And I heard that this is a club that serves the best filet in Philly and great mashed potatoes. Legendary. She said, no, you enjoy the mashed potatoes. Enjoy the filet, but no. But here, take the invite with you. Put it in my back pocket, and I went. The way I go to places may be ready to cause a little bit of trouble, because that's who I am. I go there, I'm sitting with the president of the company, with all these nice people who like to go golfing in the Conquistador in Puerto Rico. And the president says, oh, by the way, Javier, where's your wife? And I said, unfortunately, she was not invited. He said, nonsense, I wrote the invitation myself. And that's when I whipped out the envelope. And I said, do you see her name here? You who have known her for so long. And it was an awkward moment for them, not for me, because I was enjoying the filet and the mashed potatoes. They were lumpy in the right way, if you know what I mean. And here's the thing. It's not that you have to do stuff like that, all right? You leave that to me, because I like to get in trouble. Every now and then, when you stand up for what you believe in, you are going to have uncomfortable silences, and you have to deal with that. But let them deal with that, because you have to teach people how you want to be respected. So there's that. Physical appearance is another issue. I have a tan that does not go away. In the winter, I'm a little lighter. This is my summer look. Okay? I haven't been in the sun too much, but this is what happens. It's not a factor where I live. There's so many Puerto Ricans in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and it obviously was not a factor for my parents in Puerto Rico, the fact that my dad was dark-skinned and my mom was light-skinned. When they bought their house in Bayamón, Puerto Rico back in the 60s, they had pride of ownership. You know what that means, right? The illusion that that house belongs to you instead of Bank of America. That is my only economic reference of the day. When my wife and I bought our house in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania back in 2006, we had pride of ownership. And in the front there was a big rose bush, overgrown. And my father-in-law gave me a pair of shears. He said, Javier, I think this is imported from England, and these are the best shears that you have. When you cut those rose bushes, it's going to be like butter. I was excited. I went to Home Depot, I got a pair of gloves, and I start cutting the rose bush in front of my house. And my excitement increased when I saw my neighbor from across the street park his car, an Audi. And he gets out, golf hat, golf shirt. He's coming over. And I'm like, yes. Why? Because I learned, growing up in Puerto Rico and watching American movies and TV shows, that when you move into a new neighborhood in the U.S., your neighbors get you apple pie. So I'm like, I'm going to get apple pie de manzana. Yes. I remove my glove and we shake hands. And I say, hey, nice to meet you. I'm Javier. And he says, what a coincidence. My guy's name was Jose, but he had to go back to Mexico. Listen, Javier, when you're done with this garden, could you come over to my house and give me an estimate on mine? Don't feel bad. Remember, I thought I was Patrick Swayze. And I'm also a clown, so I played along with it. And I said, which one is it? That one over there? Yes. Okay, don't worry about it. As soon as I'm done with this one. I finished my job. Pretty good job I did there. Don't know if it's genetic, but I did a pretty good job. And then I went to my house, printed an estimate on my computer, my printer. I wrote Avila Mowing and Lawn Services. And I put down $500 an hour. All right? So I go over to him and I say, here you go. Let's just call him Patrick. That's his name. Here's your estimate. And he says this literally. Oh, Javier, I don't know if in Puerto Rico they know about decimal points, but this should be $5 an hour, not 500. You see, you have the dot in the wrong spot. And that's when I told him that I was his new neighbor, the owner of the house. And he immediately felt bad. He apologized and he said, Javier, I don't want you to think that I am a racist in any way. And I said, you know what's funny? I never thought that. I thought you were going to get me apple pie. So you see, we both thought something different of each other. So what happened? 9 years went by, and we did not speak. I would wave hi every time. I would go like that, and he would just turn around. I'm like, all right, I guess that's the way it's going to be. And then something magical happened. In 2015, I was named Pennsylvania's Professor of the Year, first Latino in history to get that award, and my college was so proud of this marketing opportunity. I'm sorry. We're not recording this, are we? We're so proud of this accomplishment. We can cut that. That they posted billboards of me all over the highways of Pennsylvania, like this. And it's like, Javier Avila, Pennsylvania's Professor of the Year. Come to this college and get a great education. You know, all that good stuff. You know how. And my neighbor saw it, and he came knocking on the door. And I opened the door. I'm like, hey, it's been a long time. How are you? He said, let me shake your hand, Javier. I did not know I was living across from a celebrity. So I'm not really a celebrity. I'm an educator, and this is something the college is doing to celebrate the achievement. But how great that it took this achievement for me to be worthy of shaking your hand. And then I asked the noble question, you think I could get that apple pie now? I'm still waiting for it. I would like any one of you who has a good place, because I am sure Madison is a beautiful, beautiful place. Oh my God. The only bad thing is that my son just got stung by a bee twice last night. But he's okay. We'll visit him in the hospital later, but he's okay. No, I'm kidding. A good place for apple pie. Recommend, please. Not right now, because I'm doing something, but soon. So anyway, so that happened. I'm still waiting for the apple pie. So that's name, physical appearance. Here's another way that you can be found out that you are indeed Latino or Latina, and that is your accent. Your accent. Why does it happen? Simple, right? If you learn another language after the ideal language acquisition age, which is when? When is it the ideal time to learn another language? Sir, right there, I'm pointing to you. No, that's good. That's good. Between 0 and 12. Between 0 and 12, that's the right time. The best time. There is no right time. The right time is any time you want to, but the best time to learn it without an accent is when you're a child, because you retain and you build muscle memory and you learn tongue placement. You know where things go. For example, if you learn it later, you might not know that to utter the sound for the letter T in English, you have to put the tip of your tongue on the roof of your mouth. Yet in Spanish, you put the tip of your tongue behind your front teeth. Ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. Tiempo. Ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. Time. So if you say time, you have an accent. If you say tiempo, you have an accent. Because you're using the one tool with the wrong arsenal. And if you say, Dieques, estoy contigo, you're Ricky Martin. We forgive Ricky for his American accent because we love him. But the thing is that if you don't know the complexities of language acquisition, you could say something completely foolish. And no one will tell you you're wrong unless there is a Latino in the room who will let you know. And I am always happy to be that Latino. I had a professor in grad school, let's just call him Professor Murphy, because that's his name. It would be worse if I say it was IUP, but I didn't. Who was a woke man who assigned us a book that had words in Spanish. And every time he came across a word, this was 20 years ago. Every time he came across a word he didn't know, he would ask me, the token Latino, what it meant. And if you can believe it, this man was more dramatic than I. So he was like, Javier, what does this mean? And I was like, oh my God, calm down, sir. There's a scene in the book where the main character reaches the Mexican border. And Professor Murphy goes, and this is the scene where our hero runs into the Jovenes, Javier. I'm like, yes. Who are these Jovenes? Is this a Mexican gang? Are they going to hurt her? And I read the page, the word, and it says, jóvenes. It's that Professor Murphy, it's not Jovenes, it's jóvenes, jóvenes. She just ran into some kids. That's all. But he looked at me for a few seconds and he said, are you sure? I'm like, yes, I'm sure. Spanish is my first language. That is the first time in my life that it hit me. I was in my early 20s. That when you are in the minority, you will be doubted, even though you might have the expertise. Right? You go, like, what, Jovenes, So be careful and understand that it's not really his fault or that he's not doing it because he hated me. No, he just didn't know. And it's okay for us to have a teaching moment and to let them know. And don't get mad all the time about every little microaggression that happens in your life because you're not going to live a good life. You're going to be angry all the time and paranoid and thinking, is it because I'm Latino? Huh? So don't think that way. So speaking of accents, there's another thing that I'd like to talk about. My cousin here, Margarita Avila, where are you? Margarita, ¿cómo estás? By the way, I'm kidding. She's not my cousin, but she's an Avila. And I was so happy. Margarita, on your name tag, do you have the accent mark on the A? So we don't know if you're Avila or Avila or Avila. But we who come from Spanish-speaking countries and who have the accent mark, that little stick that hovers over vowels to indicate emphasis on a syllable. What happens to that little stick, that accent mark, when we move to the U.S.? It's gone. And it's not a tragedy, right? We're not like, oh my God, I miss my accent mark. No. But it's one of many, many things that we start losing. So because I am Latino, I like to honor my students' heritage and always write the accent mark and let them know, hey, I kind of know where you come from and I identify with you and I know how to say your name right. So I had a student, I always look at the list of students before and I practice and I go on YouTube and I practice and you can't get them all right because there are some things that are just not in my arsenal. but I try. But when the Latino students come, it's a piece of cake for me. So I see David Perez, and I go, my God, when this kid comes to my classroom, he's going to feel included. He's going to feel at home. So the day comes, and there he is, David Perez, New York Yankees hat, little thin beard, and he is like talking to everyone, very happy. I'm like, all right, here we go. So I take roll, you know, all the Kirstens and Kristens and all that. And then I get to him and I say, David Perez. And he goes, no, yo, prof. It's Dave Perez. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about, Dave Perez? You're David Perez. No, I don't speak no Spanish. So apparently you don't speak any English either. But here's the thing. Listen, that's what he identified as, and I had to respect it. But that's not what bothered me, because, well, why not? You know, I have a cousin named Johnny. We all know he's Juan, but he's Johnny, and he's like, oh, I'm Johnny Morales. I'm like, all right, no Juan Morales, as we all know you, but that's okay. What bothered me was that there was a bit of a hint of a lack of pride in his background. So I told my wife that night when I came home, hey, hon, there's this kid, Dave Perez, sweet kid, but he seems to be ashamed of his New Yorican roots. He's New Yorican. You know what that means, right? A New Yorker of Puerto Rican descent. All right. So my wife, in all her wisdom, says, well, honey, two things. First, the pride thing, you're going to fix that because you are probably his first Puerto Rican English professor. So that's going to be fixed. And second, please understand that you also hated your name growing up in Puerto Rico. And she was right. Growing up in Puerto Rico, I hated my name, not for the reasons you might think. It's just there were too many of us. In Latin America, Javier, back in the 80s when I was a kid, Javier was the second most popular name in all of Latin America. The first one was David. Second was Javier. There were 4 Javieres in my class. And I wanted to be Javi, but there was already a Javi. I couldn't be Javi. In 6th grade, back in 1980 something, I want to reveal how old I am. I liked this girl, her name, Lizbeth. We called her Liz. Liz. And I went on my 6th grade dance. It was a party de marquesina, garage party. They play All Out of Love by Air Supply. You know what I'm talking about. I'm all out of love. I'm so lost without you. I go to the corner, I get my little sample of Dracar Noir, spray it. Who's in their 40s or 50s? You know what I'm talking about, all right. I go up to her and I say, Liz, you look beautiful tonight. Good move, right? Good move. She said, oh, thank you. And then, with all the courage that I had, I said, would you like to dance? She said, not right now, I'm a little tired, but thanks. I sat. What happened 10 seconds later? Not just somebody else. Javi. The better Javier. Then. I say then because I am on social media and I have seen that Javi now. I won. But anyway, I wanted a cool, different name that showed that I was artistic, I was a skateboarder, I was funny, I was good at math. I wanted something unique. Like a friend of ours who lived in Puerto Rico, came from the US, and he had the most exotic name of all my friends. His name, Sean. Now you think, oh, what are you talking about? In Puerto Rico? Woo, incredibly exotic. S-E-A-N, and his last name, equally exotic, Roberts. We couldn't say either Sean or Roberts properly, so we say John Robert. The trouble with his name, right? So every time he came to a party, someone's house, John Robert viene para acá, John Robert viene para acá, John Robert viene para acá. Oh, I wanted to be like John Robert, but I was the very commonly named Javier Avila. Well, I got my wish. Many, many years later, I moved to Pennsylvania, and I realized that I had an exotic name. At first, like the first 100 times, it was cute. And then I realized, no one's ever going to get it. So, the poem that I'm going to read to you now is for anyone here who has ever gone to Starbucks and you already have your fake Starbucks name, because you know your name is too difficult for them. Who identifies with this problem? You know what I'm talking about, all right. My Starbucks name is Henry. I know it's weird, I don't look like a Henry, but my middle name is Enrique, which is Henry in English, so I go by Henry. All right. Dedicated to La Prima, Margarita Avila. This is the trouble with my name. All my life, I had been mispronouncing my name, which I thought was Javier Avila, until I moved to Pennsylvania to learn linguistics outside the classroom. First came the tennis club experience. Hi, may I help you? The nice lady asked. Yes, I have a court reserved for 2 p.m., I replied. Under what name? Avila. You must mean Avila. I said, yes, that's what I meant. And I thought how nice of her to teach me the proper pronunciation of my name. It baffled me, though, because my U.S. publisher has called me Uvula for 7 years. My student who wrote Avila on his first paper seemed surprised when I suggested that he look at the syllabus and read the proper spelling of my name. And when he handed in his second paper and said, I got the name right this time, and I saw that he had written Avila again, I told him that we never stopped learning. And he grinned as though he had never heard sarcasm before. The police officer who pulled me over for having tinted windows said, I'm going to let this slide because it's not so dark, Mr. Avilar. And when I corrected him, he said, that might be the way Spanish people say it, but this is America. And who am I to tell him that I am not Spanish, or that America consists of dozens of countries, and in most of them, se habla español. The principal at my son's school prides herself in saying the students' names correctly. Therefore, when she said, Mr. Avila, we'd be honored if you could come and read poetry to the children, I naturally accepted, in part because she didn't call me Mr. Avila like the parent who recommended me did. You see, I like that they have options, that they can be creative, that they will bravely forego looking it up or asking the person who has had the name for 40 years or so. But the real trouble, as it turns out, is my first name. Waiting for my license, the DMV lady yelled, Javier! I had to look around to realize she meant me. When I was hired to teach a writing workshop, my future colleague shook my hand and said, welcome to the department, Javier. And it made me feel so nice in French. At a conference, a fellow writer introduced me to his friends as the Puerto Rican poet laureate, Javier. And to hear the first syllable stressed so dactylically transported me to a Longfellow masterpiece. The first time my chiropractor called me Javier, I went through an ethnic crisis. But that was resolved when 10 minutes later, the massage therapist said, let's see how much stress you've been holding on to, Javier. And of course, I felt something was fishy when the MC at the Poetry Festival introduced me as Dr. Caviar. Getting takeout is an issue. When they ask, what's the name? I panic. What should be my takeout alter ego? Even Siri gets confused with me, and we have an intimate relationship. I mean, why go to the gym every day if she insists on calling me Javier? You see, when my friends moved to the States, they became other people instantly, without alternate pronunciations. Ivan Velez became Ivan Velez. Joel Ramos became Joel Ramos. And Brenda Aguirre became Brenda Aguirre. I, on the other hand, became many people every day, and I still do. There seems to be no cure for my multiple name pronunciation disorder, but there is a prescription that can heal it, one that can be renewed daily by phone. So every day, I dial the number, the only one I'll always know by heart. And as soon as she answers the phone, I hear my name the way it's supposed to sound, in the voice of my mother. Gracias. Oh, my mama. Thank you. My mother is going to turn 87 soon, and she was almost at the age that my grandmother, not her mom, but her mother-in-law, was when she wanted to reveal something to me. This segment of the presentation is about my grandmother, Veneranda Rivera, a woman who lived to be 103 years old. She was born in 1898 and she died in 2001. So she saw the entire 20th century. And she was larger than life, even though she was tiny, about 4'10" and about 80 pounds. And when she smiled, she would light up the room. Yet when she smiled, you quickly noticed that she was missing her 4 front teeth. She had these big fangs, but with those fangs, she would get a chicken and she would annihilate it, leave no evidence that there was ever a chicken there. She would eat the marrow. When she was in her 90s, she would go to the casinos in San Juan and to the restaurants and the hotels where the casinos were. She would bring a big purse. She lined it with aluminum foil, no Tupperware, and inside she would put pizza slices, shrimp, rice, steak, and then she would serve that to us for a few days. Cómetelo, que bueno, cómetelo. When she was very, very old, she said, Javier, one day I want you to know the true story of my life, because there are things that happened that will shock you. At the time, I didn't know that she was about to give me a treasure, a gift. So I made a joke, because I was too young and ignorant. And I said, what, did you ever get a parking ticket, Grandma? I couldn't imagine that my little grandmother could have ever done anything shocking. So after she died, years after she died, that's when I became curious. It's the funny thing. We value things and people sometimes after they're gone. Luckily, I had my mother, and I asked, Mami, ¿qué pasó con abuela? What was her big secret? And my mom says, if you want to know, sit down and I will tell you. So I sit down, and my mom starts telling me about my grandmother, how she was, in her youth, illegally targeted and followed by the FBI for 12 years. I'm like, what? Abuelita, what did she do? Was she a criminal? No, she was a Puerto Rican nationalist, and not just any Puerto Rican nationalist. She was best friends with Don Pedro Albizu Campos, the head of the Puerto Rican Nationalist Party. This means that these are Puerto Ricans who wanted the independence of Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico, a country that has been twice colonized for your pleasure. First by Spain for 400 years, and then by this country that I am so proud to be a part of. So it's a conflict to be a Puerto Rican, right? You don't know what you are. My grandmother was jailed for doing something that was against the law back in the 50s. There was a gag law for anyone who displayed the Puerto Rican flag in public. And my grandmother, yeah. Why? Because she wanted to make a point. And whenever you see Puerto Rican flags anywhere, that's not just someone saying, I'm Puerto Rican. That's an act of rebellion. So all this happened while her 3 children, my dad and my 2 uncles, were fighting for this country in the Korean War, and all 3 came back damaged. Love knows no political boundary, so we did not talk about this in our family. When I remember my grandmother, what I recall are her great sayings, her witticisms, and all the products that she used, all the Latino products that she used, that she loved, and that I would like to share with you briefly, because I think everyone here would benefit from this. Now, let me start with the most common one, all right? Now, you know, I have to teach you the proper pronunciation of this, because you might think this is Vicks VapoRub, but you would be wrong. Repeat after me. This is Vicks Vaporub. Big Vaporub. What is this good for? Exactly. No one has suffered from COVID whilst having Vicks. I'm not saying they haven't had COVID. I'm saying they didn't suffer. You put this over here. You put this on your chest. You put that, not there. You put that on the soles of your feet. You cover it. You're good to go. You think you have a cold? The young people, Joe Venice in the room, remember this, all right? Don't be ashamed of having this all the time. Think you have a cold? You have a fever? You will sweat 3 pounds of sweat and Vicks if you put it all over yourself. I am a believer of witch hazel. Witch hazel is great for after shaving, for minor cuts and scrapes, for bug bites, muscle aches. It is fantastic for battling acne. A battle that begins at age 12 and never ends. But it's not just any witch hazel. You must support this lady right here, the Humphreys lady. You see her? She's magic. If you have a pimple, and you pop that pimple. You put a little witch hazel on a cotton pad consistently, and in one day, the pimple is gone with Humphrey's witch hazel. I'm thinking, I hope Humphreys one day promotes my event. That would be great. Promoted by Humphreys. WF, Alliant, and Humphreys in the middle. All right. Trust in the power of this, okay? If you can't find the Humphreys, go for the Dickinson. Do not go for other brands. They will give you more acne. Now, you may not be able to find this in these parts, but this is Bay Rum, Alcoholado Superior 70. It's wonderful if you're in the middle of a hot summer. I don't know if you know what heat is in Wisconsin. But I'm from Puerto Rico, so it's a different kind of heat. But if you're in the middle of a hot summer, right, and your AC broke, put a little bit of this behind your neck, and it's good. It's nature's air conditioning. This is also good for to battle poison ivy and any kind of rash. My grandmother would drink it. I don't recommend it, but let me see. Oh my God. And last but not least, please don't answer this question, but who here has arthritis? If you do, and you might try all kinds of solutions, but have you ever tried manteca de ubre la vaquita? Udder butter. This is incredible. But if you have arthritis, and for any muscle aches, you better have a friend who does not have arthritis to open this, because this is impossible to open, okay? But once you do, and you open this, it is a beautiful smell. Is a mix of love, root beer, and mint, if that makes sense. When I think of my grandmother, and we all carry our culture in our bellies, I think about her cooking, And when we all get a little sad and we want a good meal, we think of the meals of our childhood. For some of you, it could be, I don't know, spaghetti and meatballs, or pierogies, or maybe a hot dog. I don't know. That would be sad. For me, it's rice and beans. That's what it is for me. So I'm going to read a poem here and let you know that the conference will have rice and beans for everyone attending. No, I'm sorry. No, that was not here. Okay, I'm sorry. This is a tribute to my grandmother, and I hope that you think of your own grandmothers when you hear this. En casa de abuela. Doña Bene, the best cook in San Juan, did not own any measuring cups. Her kitchen was too small to fit 2 people. And when she seasoned the food, it appeared as though she threw spice after spice, leaves, and sofrito randomly into the old pots and pans. Her freezer housed the snow that afflicts old appliances. On the countertops, a glass jar with reused oil beside a clogged strainer would terrify anyone interested in longevity. And there she was, 90 years old, dark, minuscule, and hunched, in her lavender sleeping gown, flattening plantains, mixing reca with red bell peppers, flashing a nearly toothless smile that would look like a vagrant's if she were on the street. And then she would serve us on the cobalt blue plates, steamy white rice, red beans, chicken fricassé, tostones, a slice of avocado from the tree that she planted in her youth. And she reminded us that there was flan de coco for dessert. Eat everything, she said, as she walked to the living room to sit on her red armchair and rub witch hazel on her legs. We devoured the meal. We always did, knowing once again that despite what anyone would say, we were never poor. Thank you. I would like to leave you with this thought. I got into this because of to public speaking because of my Pennsylvania Professor of the Year award, and we have to update the bio. We've done more than 300 of these all over the country, and what I feel that I am doing with all of you is that we are building a cathedral of fairness together. The great cathedrals of our time took generations to build. And when you started working on it, you most likely knew that you were not going to live to see the finished product. But that's not going to deter you from working your hardest to achieve equality amongst all of us. So I'd like to thank you for all the work that you're doing. It is wonderful work. to have a better world in which we can all coexist and celebrate what truly is the beauty of America, which is our diversity and all the different contributions that we bring to the table. Because the most diverse companies over time are the ones who thrive the most. And I mean over much, much time. So maybe at first it doesn't look that way. And there's a lot of culture clashes when it comes to accepting one another, understanding one another. But once we get on that beautiful, harmonious journey, we are going to thrive together. So I leave you with that. And 3 questions I will accept. 3 questions. Oh, look at that. 1, 2. Oh my, I don't know how to choose. I saw 2 hands and I don't know what to do. Go ahead, just speak up. Whoever wants to speak loudly.
What made you move to Pennsylvania?
Love. The woman that I met in grad school, that she came to Puerto Rico and she lived there for 4 years, and then she said, you know what? You teach English. Most of your relatives went to the States, because I have a very dispersed family. They're all over. I have family in Texas, Florida, New York, Pennsylvania. So let's move closer to my family. And at first I was like, oh. But then I realized that I have been able to do much more for Puerto Rico from Pennsylvania than in Puerto Rico, if that makes sense. What's your name?
Carrie Braxton.
Spell, please.
Carrie.
Okay.
Last name B as in boy.
Okay.
Raston. Like
Oh.
Braxton.
Unbreak my heart. Say you love me again. Okay, I'm kidding. I'm sorry, I got excited. All right. Carrie Braxton, come on down or up, whatever you call this stage, so I can give you the book. Who are the other questions? 2 years ago, I would have jumped. Won't anymore. In my mid-40s, I don't jump like this anymore. Thank you. Thank you very much. Oh, hold on. I jumped. All right. All right. I'm going to get back up this way. Oh, look at it. I don't know who to pick.
Me.
I will mail you books if you don't get to answer. Just find me there somewhere on social media. Just send me a message. I promise you I will answer. I don't have many followers because I'm an old guy. Yes?
You told the story about your giving your father that twin, about him being toxic.
Yes, yes.
And that says to me, at the age of 6, you were already dealing with it.
I internalized. It's an internalized self-hatred, you would say.
Because I was thinking to myself, I didn't know about that when I was 6. I didn't get that until like the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th grade. But how did your dad respond to that? Because I would imagine that it may have brought back some, when you said he was in the Army, I'm assuming that there was some trauma around when he was serving. Did he respond and talk to you about that? Or?
Not at that age. Not at that age. Later on, he told me that one of the reason why he lives in Puerto Rico is because no one in Puerto Rico called him the N-word. Where he lived in New York right after he served. Imagine serving, getting hurt, being a sergeant in the Army, coming back, and someone in New York says, go back to your country, you, and other words that, but it's interesting, because he was the one who taught me about accepting a world where some people might seem loud and the voices of hatred might seem overwhelming, but most of the people that you will meet do not hate you and do not want to make you invisible, but you have to make yourself visible also. You can't allow the narrative to be that way. So he said, listen, you have to forgive and you have to understand they don't know who he is. So he may have laughed it off, but then all my life, everyone said that I looked just like him. So I started to think, okay, well, I am just like my dad. And when I see my son, who is white with green eyes, he looks a lot like my dad. And my son is proud of saying that too. Oh, I look like Alfonso. That's my my father's name. But it was not easy for him. It was not easy for him to have lived in the States, to love a country that did not always include him. But that did not stop him. And I think he would be proud to know that I have embraced it and that I try to spread a message of love rather than a message of paranoia or hate. So thank you. And your name is? Thank you.
I'm the one for the old card. Right? I got one of the names. Now you have to get off the table. That's the only thing you can.
All right. I don't know who the third question is, but all right, let me see your name there. Eso es fácil. Oh, what a great name.
Yeah, it is, ain't it?
Okay. Sorry, I did have another poem to read, but I know you have to go on break and eat something. 8, 15, 22.
Oh, 22.
There you go.
Yes.
22. Vamos.
Oh, gosh, we're the same height, too.
Thank you. All right. This person will get a book. I still don't expect a lot of people to pronounce it the way that I pronounce it, but I have grown very tolerant of that because of the whole thing about accents. Like some people might not be able to, let's say if my name were Ramon. Imagine I'm Ramon. I'm not going to expect you, if you cannot roll the R, say, roll the R, it's Ramon. No, because that would be intolerant of me. After a certain age, it's very hard to utter those sounds. So I go for like a happy medium. As long as you don't call me Dr. Available or Anvil, as I have been, or I'm fine. Because ultimately, I mean, you feel really at home when they say it exactly the way that you remember it. But unless you're a native speaker and you're my best friend, I'm not going to expect that of you. But at least have the knowledge that, you know, the J is not, it's like that, Javier. But that's it. You can say Javier, you can say Javier if you want to, I don't care. You can say Javi, you can say Javi and I can be the new Javi. Go back to 1986 and fix all those things. All right, I'll get you. I don't want to make you walk all the way, but this is yours. Any other questions or I know we're running out of time. I know we got to go. But I will be, am I doing something later too? Okay, I'll be here later. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you. Thank you.
Is this? That was great. Ruben, I think I didn't know who brought this stuff. I was thinking to myself, whose mother is coming to the stage? And if nobody claimed it, I was going to take it home.
Yeah. Hey, let's give Javier another round of applause.